agent harness work. Looks like I'm live everywhere. Should be on Kick and X and YouTube. Not on Rumble yet because I'm not paying for a premium subscription to be able to stream. At least not at this point. But yesterday I was working on some system prompt improvements, and yeah, I ended up with a plan for some improvements and never got around to implementing it, so I thought I might as well jump back on the stream. And yeah, I'm actually gonna implement this in Codex, and so I have the plan here, and I'm just gonna say I have it already on its own branch. Let's see, I'm say please make as much progress as you can on this plan. Commit and push changes as appropriate while you work. And I think high is fine. I don't know if there's really a huge difference in the quality of work between different thinking levels. That's not something I've played around with too much, but I'm only on the $20 a month OpenAI plan, and yeah, at this point I got about 20% of my weekly limit left, so it's not terrible, but and, you know, I can always buy extra usage as I go, but yeah, when I hit my limit for this, I'll go back to Cursor, I guess. But yeah, one thing that these system prompt improvements are going to unlock for us is, let's see, where is it in Cursor? So we're compressing the workspace section. That'll be good. More hierarchical disclosure. And then removing the plans detail into a lazy loaded thing. So that's only going to be relevant when you're actually working on a plan within a project. You've got critical rules, memory trace events, and then in some ways what I think is going to be the most powerful in terms of unlocking more like easily reachable features to implement today is going to be the prompt sections in versioned template files, so that it'll just load content from markdown files that contain the relevant parts of the system prompt, and then yeah, we can use this for A/B testing. We can also use this for management of identities and roles. Yeah, honestly, I'm not a big fan of the word identity in this context. I would strongly prefer to use the word role. Whenever you're dealing with AI agents, what you're doing is a kind of role play. But yeah, it's it's something very, very strange that's been trained to play a character that'll be recognizable to human beings. But yeah, I think ultimately we're going to end up with a roles folder inside the prompts folder. Or maybe we'll just have a roles file, and each role can probably be specified in just a few lines, and so we can break it up into sections and have a simple Python script that will extract the relevant role by name. Yeah, still some things to think about. Again, I feel like this is not a well-mapped design space at all. We're all kind of figuring it out as we go. but I have very strong intuitions that concepts at the level of personality and narrative and role and character will be some of the most effective levers for helping these agents to do what we want. But yeah, I think we're all trying to figure out how to help AI agents do better relevance realization. If they can manage their own context. So what's Codex doing here? Is the status active rather than in progress? So yeah, it's grounding its implementation in the actual repo. I'm going to hook the lazy addendum off that existing source of truth instead of adding a second scanner. And again, this is the X is not Y, it's Z pattern, because right, the planned implementation of this, what this is going to be, is it's not a second scanner. It's hooking off the existing source of truth, and so it's going to reuse existing functionality instead of duplicating the functionality. But yeah, the way that it makes it explicit, I think that's a very deep property of the way that these things think, the kind of moves that they're making in semantic space. I do just find that helpful to think about it that way, that these things have a broader spread in semantic space than we typically do. But yeah, so what are we doing? I ran some tests on full prompt down to 9500. Workspace section is now much shorter, but like that. The long plan mechanics are behind with plan context. Writing that flag into mode construction, including grok. Huh. Yeah, haven't done much testing with different models. I just use the default. I think is Claude Sonnet 4.6. And so we've got critical rules. Replace the workspace prompt body with a shorter version. Okay, so it's running the test suite, and then it's going to commit this chunk, and then maybe next it will. I wish I could see a list of to-dos right here as far as what it's planning to do next. But yeah, that's something I can put into my own agent harness UI. Okay, our test passed. We're going to commit. Okay, we improved system prompt budgeting. And then next we're going to create the prompt files. Yeah, this first draft of the prompt files is a good start, but I definitely want to do some more design thinking about how I'm going to organize all of that and put it together. Moving existing rendered strings from markdown files, keeping harness.prompts as the public loader API. Test will exercise the exact same prompt rendering path after the move. That seems to make sense. So yeah, the entry point to get all of our prompts is going to be prompts. So I wonder if we can watch it make the edits in real time. It's going to look at that. Oh, I'm sorry. I switched my window without switching my OBS view. But but yeah, and so you didn't see it change in real time, but yeah, this file used to have all the system prompts, and now it is just loading files. Cool. It's got the UTF-8 encoding. Huh. OBS is showing me it dropped YouTube. Whatever. Okay, so we've got all these different sections. And so inside harness we now have, yeah, okay. Critical rules. Where's root before you edit? That's real simple. Change the first small precise edits over large rewrites. And yeah, identity here, this is going to be important for managing roles. There's going to be roles and modes, and I think yeah, mode. I want to have this idea of a role as a more persistent character and a mode as a lower level sort of characterization that varies from one run to the next, where a run is what's triggered by an input, from a user or from an automated process. But a run is an input into the system that starts the agent doing something. It starts with a prompt and ends with a response. And a run is made of turns, and a turn is when an agent makes a tool call. Maybe it reads its memory, maybe it does some kind of project management task in its workspace, or it calls a web search tool, or writes a file or something. All of these things happen within a turn, which is the smallest sequential unit of action in the system, because tool calls within a turn can be parallel. And so we have a run which has a mode, and then there's a session which is a sequence of runs, and probably I think one would generally want to stick to one role within one session, but yeah, I haven't thought as much about roles, but I think for modes I want to have at least two. There's a chat mode and a work mode, and a plan mode, which, yeah, basically what Cursor has, which you can see. I just shift tab in this bar, we can switch plan or debug, which I haven't used all that much. I generally just debug with an agent and have it go and figure things out, but yeah, there's so much to learn. And this multitask mode is new. That's not something I've ever seen before. But then there's ask, and so I'm thinking I really want to distinguish between. Cursor originally had 3 modes: ask, plan, and agent, which is the default. And yeah, I would probably call them chat, plan, and work, because I like that they're all 4 characters. Probably add a 4th mode, call it like meta, for stuff that is less well specified and leaves the agent more open to. Yeah. Maybe it should run by meta. It should run in meta mode by default, and we could leave it up to the agent to determine in any particular instance based on the prompt it just got, whether this run is more like a chat or a plan or a work. But then we could have a command line argument where you could explicitly specify. Yeah. But yeah, honestly, if we're thinking four-letter words, actually, meta is a little too highfalutin. The mode should be called none, N-O-N-E. And so that's, yeah, yeah. And so if right, the mode defaults to none, and if it's none, the agent chooses. That's easy enough. But yeah, then the hard part is like, what is going to make the difference between these modes in the system prompts, in the harness architecture? That different modes will have different context. Yeah, I think there's already somewhere something that has read-only affordances. I think it's in CLI. Come on. Read-only, yes. Okay, so we do have read-only tools specified. We can search, we can do to-dos. Yeah, I'm inclined to rethink how to-dos are being managed here, just because an agent in chat mode, there's reasons why you would want an agent that you're just chatting with to be able to manage its own to-dos within session. Um, and so yeah, how to-dos fit into this whole system is a big design decision that needs some more thought. But yeah, Cursor does them one way and Claude Code does them in a similar way, and yeah, didn't see anything like that here in Codex Desktop. Yeah, maybe I just don't know where to look, or maybe I should give it something more complicated. But I felt like this was a fairly involved multi-step plan. Oh, getting messages in my family group chat. My cousin's rugby team is in the National Sevens Championship. Apparently the game is streaming on Amazon Prime. If anyone likes women's college rugby. Game is only 14 minutes long. Starts in 5 minutes. So, I won't be terribly offended if you want to leave this stream and go watch the rugby game. But yeah. Again, I hope I'm not doxing my family, but I figure I can be fast and loose as long as I'm small potatoes, so get it all out of my system before I get discovered. But yeah, so we've got this stuff. I think it's been committing and pushing as appropriate. We're going to make a PR. And yeah, this should go into the Alex branch. I think it was branched off of. Oh, and silly me. Keep going back and forth between Cursor and Codex. And all the agentic coding tools I use start with a C. Cursor, Codex, and Claude Code. It's crazy making. But PR, and so that'll show up on GitHub. What are we looking at? Refactor system prompt handling. There we go. And we should get a review from. Oh my goodness. No. We gotta. No. This is a UI feature that trips me up every time. I want to change the base branch of a pull request, and so I click on the base branch name, and it just takes me to the branch that I have to actually edit, and then I get the drop down. It's like, no, yeah, this is way too much. So what are we, okay, that's a much more reasonable number of changes there, and yet just a few commits. Okay, well now we're gonna use one of my favorite features in Cursor, which is called babysitting in Ngram Harness. We probably want this on the cloud. And yeah, we'll make GPT 5.5 do it, because it's half off through May 2nd. So, what branch are we on? We're on Codex System Prompt Improvements. And I just want to say, babysit PR, what number was this? Number 27. Babysit PR number 27. And, oh, you gotta be kidding me. That's probably a transient network error. Setting up its cloud environment, which, yeah, it takes a little longer than if it was local, but no, it's not going to be messing with any of my local stuff. But yeah, we'll see if because usually Codex will respond with an eyes emoji, let us know that it's given us a review. But yeah, it hasn't showed up yet. Maybe I'm at my limit with the Codex code reviews. That wouldn't surprise me. I use those all the time. I did a bunch of them yesterday. As far as token usage in 99% of yesterday or Friday's token usage was in the desktop app. That's interesting. But 13 of the 15 Codex threads that I used were in code review. It's just I was having the desktop app do much more intensive work. The code reviews is usually just some small changes. But yeah, I'm not getting my automated Codex review. We'll request one from Copilot, just because I can. So yeah, we have some failing CI checks here. And yeah, I'm glad it's not running all of the Ngram MCP tests, because those would take like 20 minutes to finish. Yeah, this is all over much quicker. But yeah, so what's our agent doing? It's got to install Python. I love how these things can solve their own problems. So they're all formatter failures. That's easy. watch until the CI checks pass. We've also got a review going on here. Ah, looks like it's game on. The Women's National Sevens Championship. All you rugby fans out there. Yeah, what's Copilot doing here? You know, I've honestly gotten pretty far. I've gotten good results. You know, leaving agents to work relatively unsupervised for, you know, half an hour or more. But generally, I like to watch what they're doing, so that I get a sense of how they're thinking about the code, what kind of strategies they're trying, and yeah, and anything that they miss, any mistakes that they habitually make, so that I can think about, you know, how can I improve the structure of the code base or the agent notes or something about the process to help it not make the same mistakes. Okay. So prompt flags yield all false might be a good idea to have minimal prompts. Memory backend isn't utilizing the workspace. File mode doesn't register work tools. Yeah. But yeah, it generally shouldn't be running in file mode, because the point of this project is to be a harness that's integrated with the Ngram memory backend. I was finding markdown errors, that's nice. Okay, so yeah, this agent's still working. But yeah, I definitely want to, better off doing this in an editor window. So yeah, I really want to take a look at our new prompt files. We got prompt templates. Yeah, identity is very simple. And yeah, this is something that we're definitely going to elaborate on a lot more. But yeah, it will probably end up being called roles. I'll see what I want to do with that. Rules, read before you edit. I thought that was moved to critical rules. Well, it's an important one, so it's worth repeating. Tool errors do not repeat the same call. So I follow for intentional full file writes create for edit file for small surgical edits, so that's good. Avoid one huge tool called JSON payload, write section by section with a pen file or generate the file with run script. Yeah, even if you're generating a file with run script, you're going to have to pass a huge payload with all the file content into run script. Write section by section. Yeah, or generate the file in chunks. Yeah. Delete path and move path require confirm true. Okay, and this is mechanisms for interrupting the agent loop to require user approval, which is one of my least favorite features of all these agentic coding tools, because 99% of the time it just gets in the way. That I almost never have the experience of being grateful that the model asked me for permission before doing something that I really wanted to stop it from doing. Because most of the time it's like, yes, of course I want you to do this thing. This is what I told you. But, you know, obviously I understand from an engineering perspective, like, it's better safe than sorry, you know, especially like we use these things at work for production code, and so we don't want them going off the rails for sure. If you don't know, say so. Do not invent file contents. Do not hallucinate. Use web search for external docs. That's good. For local file tools for repository code. Yeah. Yeah. Prefer internal memory tools for what? Prefer internal memory tools for, I want to say for relevant context, but that's too general. You know, you want to prefer internal memory tools for existing internal memory tools for orientation context, local file tools for repository code. That's not terrible. Multiple independent tool calls are needed. Emit them together in a single response. The harness executes them concurrently. Yes, and make the tripartite affordance scheme explicit. Yeah. Together in a single response, the harness executes them concurrently. Tool errors, change strategy before retrying. Log approach change. That's fine. Memory. Okay. This is important. Yes. Knowledge, skills, activity, users. Operational state lives in workspace, not in memory. Cool. And so we have that, and we have workspace, and we have workspace read only. Which, yeah, I feel like this naturally drops right into a chat mode, or a plan mode, right? I think. Yes, I think plan mode should have read-only tools, with the one exception that it can write a plan file, and so I probably ultimately I want to have somewhat richer tool policy semantics, and that's going to be a part of modes. Each mode is going to have its own tool policy, and basically, yeah, I mean, my gut tells me the tool policy for work mode is going to be all of them, and then for ask mode it's going to be strictly read-only tools, and then plan mode it'll be read-only with the one exception that it can write a plan file. Maybe also like a research mode where it's mostly read-only, but it can create and manage as many research plans as it takes to get the job done, and then it can also write research files, and it can write files for intermediate stages of the process that it then synthesizes into one final research report. And so I think we're going to have the work mode, which is just going to be full access to all the available tools, and we're going to have chat mode, which is totally locked down to read-only tools, and then maybe a few different families of tool policies that would have that would be basically read-only with some exceptions. And yeah, family group chats blowing up with rugby news. That's fun. But yeah, I was just thinking tool policies are going to be an important part of the modes feature that I'm thinking about. And so here, yeah, is the description of the full. Yeah, in our basic read-only mode. Huh, this actually excludes the Scratch folder? Huh. And so, yeah, would models be allowed to create notes in the Scratch folder even in read-only mode? I guess that's something I would have to actually read the code to find out. Or I could ask an agent to understand the code for me. Plans, and that's only going to be relevant within the scope of a project. Yeah, I still have two concepts of a plan in mind as like a one-off plan, like plan mode in Cursor, where it just writes it in the session and then you can click build and implement it, and then like a project plan, which is a more long-term thing. But again, I feel like there's a lot of first principles design work, a lot of experimentation and pattern finding to do with this whole AI agent situation. Yeah, read-only memory tools, workspace, we saw that. Okay, output. Okay. Okay, and so, right, and so in native it's using the native agent SDK for tool calls, but then in text mode it actually does the text parsing. And so these are our tools here. Memory tools. We have work tools. Project plan is an op dispatch plan. Oh wow, that's like I need to make a full pass over this with an agent telling it we don't need to worry about backwards compatibility at all. Yeah, okay, that's nice that the agents are considering that sort of thing. We have Bash, we have Python eval. Actually, yeah, I want to get more of a breakdown of what's the difference between Python eval and Python eval run script harness tools. Because we might want to consolidate those into one. I think in an important sense, less is more when you're dealing with what you're going to put into the agent's context window. And that might seem to be contradicted by how I radically expanded the system prompt to add all of this extra tooling that's specific to the n-gram harness architecture. But I feel like that's in a different way of looking at it. It's extracting those operations that were always available for the agent to do through the normal harness tool syntax and bringing them up to be first class affordances is the term that I keep using to think about these things, so that they don't get lost in a proliferation of tools, because we don't have that many right now. We have a handful of different kinds with files and bash and git, and Python, and then also memory and workspace tools. But yeah, that instead of all of these things being in just like the one size fits all grab bag category of tools, it's like I know specifically what the operations I want it doing on the memory system are, and so I can have much more explicit syntax at the system prompt level to specify that. And so, like I was talking about yesterday, as you add more and more tools, you don't want to have all your tool specs in the system prompt, because things will get lost in the context, and it just eats up too many tokens. And so ultimately, like Claude always does this, it has a tool search tool, and yeah, if I had it all in one tool interface where you use a tool search tool to find the right tools, that would work, and I'm sure it would reliably find the memory and work tools through tool search. But yeah, I just want to make it so that the harness can use its own features, because it has rich internal memory management. I want it to be able to use those internal features without having to go through a tool search tool to find the right tool. They should just be available in the system prompt. In a way, it's like it's like, I don't know. You learn to do something and it becomes part of your muscle memory, and so you don't need to consciously consider the steps of how it's done. You just have it ready to hand. But yeah, unfortunately, my knowledge of Heidegger is not what it could be. But I do think a lot about affordances. So I'm making these system prompt improvements, and I've got modifications upstream. And that means our cursor agent has been doing work. What are we looking at here? We got some to-dos. Okay, so yeah, fixed a formatting failure. It reviewed Copilot's comments and agreed with both. That's nice. Attempted to update the PR body, but the PR tool refused because the current description is not agent managed. I don't know what that means. it's not like I made the PR by hand. I had Codex make it. So I'm set up with persistent editable depth. Oh, okay. And so this is giving me advice on how to instruct a cloud agent to set up the dev environment that it needs to run this program locally. Because if it's running on my desktop already has everything it needs to run the thing locally. But when I want to run it on the cloud, it has to just figure out, and it does figure it out. But yeah, this is a good piece of advice for, you know, yeah, I just want to keep this little text snippet somewhere and, yeah, paste it right after I specify the PR to babysit. Yeah, I wonder if there's an easy way to edit, like, if I have my own local version of the cursor babysit skill and I can just add those instructions to it. But no, yeah, they would need to be per project. Yeah. Yeah, but, you know, in one sense, it's not my problem, it's the agent's problem to solve, and they do solve it. This one did. So yeah, it just costs me a little bit of cursor usage. So what's our PR look like now? So this is done. Alright, looks like everything's green. Yeah, give the agent a little positive feedback. They love that. Okay, so yeah, that's all merged to the Alex branch of Ngram harness. Okay. So now that that system prompt improvement is done, let's kick it over to Claude Code, because, oh yeah, this was troubleshooting some deployment stuff I was doing. Okay, so this has, we have over 500,000 tokens to burn in this context window, and so I'm going to say we don't want to be on Codex system prompt improvements. Oh my goodness, this isn't bash. Whatever. Okay, what are we doing here? Oh right, I edited the rules. Did I want to make any more edits? This is the problem with too much AI agent work. I am just always losing my train of thought. Feels like anything can happen. But yeah, I was asking about, sure, the same Python run on workspace, but one's optimized for quick expression style evaluation while the other preserves and runs scripts as artifacts. Okay, no, I do want to preserve that distinction. That's great. We love that. Okay, but yeah, I was looking at these prompt templates. I made a few small edits to the rules. Small rule edits. Okay. Oh no! What are we doing? I'm on the wrong branch. Right, because I couldn't check out the branch because I had unmerged changes. Okay. Check out Alex. If only I had left those changes uncommitted, but live and learn. What do I want? Codex. Did we get it? Yep. Okay. Slight updates to the rules. Oh, okay. Taking another look at delete path and move path require confirm true. Never assume destructive calls succeeded without checking tool results, meaning this isn't about a human in the loop. This is about if the agent wants to delete a file, the agent has to confirm that the file is no longer at that location when it's done. So I guess that's nice. Okay, so we've got everything up to date. Okay. Now let's go back to Claude. And Claude is on Alex branch. Okay, I'll just say continue with new branches and PRs as before. Yeah, this was a pretty productive session, and we're not even halfway through our million token context window, so let's see what Claude can cook up for us. Because yeah, the next step on Claude's agenda is, I think, B1 sub-agents. Actually, where is that? That plan. I have it somewhere in cursor. I don't even remember what the file was called. Plan Python tools. No, that was the one I did before. And then I did Improvement Plans 2026. Cool. Improvement Plans. Yeah, okay, so this is what we're working on. Project Strong. Cool. Theme A, memory infrastructure. I see it, so these were not linear phases of work, these were themes. Cool. That's a good way of organizing it, actually. These things are pretty smart. Big loop infrastructure, sub-agent, sidechain, primitive, single biggest missing lever based on the harness research, yeah. And the sub-agent process is going to be helped immensely by the new refactored prompt template files, because we can have different template files available for different sub-agents. Tiered context compaction. Yeah, context compaction, definitely something we've got to do. That strikes me as a relatively hard problem, one that's going to require some tuning. And fundamentally, it is a relevance realization problem. That's the whole question of context compaction, is we want to extract the relevant pieces of context from all of our prior session work and discard what is irrelevant. And And as we know from the literature on relevance realization, that's a hard problem. It can't be formally specified by an algorithm. So what's Claude up to? Retrieval observability is the natural next pick. Cool. And yeah, all this observability is going to be, I think, so much more useful when we have this plugged in to a real React front end. And then, I can do the kind of UI work that I do at my day job to make some interesting human affordances for better interacting with the system. Command lines are great affordances for large language models. Obviously, they're all text. And yeah, I mean, they're decent enough for human beings to use if you're someone who's comfortable living in text, as it were. But yeah, people like buttons and switches and things that have more of an embodied feel to them. Yeah, come to think of it, there's something about the continuous way that the mouse moves from one affordance to another versus the discrete way that one manipulates a computer via the keyboard. You can tab from this to that, and it's a qualitative jump from one element to the next, unlike the mouse cursor, which moves from one element to the next by covering the distance between them in a continuous way. And we live in a continuous space-time that we experience with our bodies, but LLMs live in a world that's entirely discrete because all of their inputs are tokenized. And so their experience, their perspective is grounded in something that's discrete and atomized in a way that our experience of the world is not. Our experience of the world is continuous. And people who get very deep into meditation might dispute that and say that experience really is more like a sequence of discrete moments than it is like a continuous flow. But I don't know. Maybe for you, maybe there's a lot of diversity in people's phenomenology of temporal continuity, but it seems like the kind of thing that would be hard to study. I don't know. I think as far as philosophy of time goes, I'm generally with St. Augustine, that I know exactly what time is as long as no one asks me to explain what time is. It's a synthetic a priori aspect of our experience, if you ask Kant, and I think there's really something to that. Again, something else you might hear from people who get very into meditation, this same sort of time as synthetic a priori, as much more a feature of the human mind than a fundamental feature of the universe. Physicists will talk about how the laws of physics are time reversible. Um, that time is the kind of thing that basically emerges from entropy. Um, but But yeah, whether time is a fundamental aspect of reality or of physics, it still seems very much like a fundamental aspect of human experience, and the way that entropy plays a role in the timeline of our lives, the fact that we're born and we mature and we senesce and we die. Um, and and the laws of physics might be time reversible, but the laws of biology are not. So somewhere time sneaks into the picture. But yeah, what understanding of time do these models even have? I feel like, insofar as they have any kind of perspective on the world, it would be very alien to us, and they they do a lot of coercing of these things into a more human-like shape for their consumer products. But the underlying intelligence of the base model is something very, very strange. 713 tests. It's not bad for a bunch of vibe-coded slop. But in the age of AI, test code is some of the cheapest code you can write. So, okay, yeah, we're getting retrieval observability, basically which memory files were used in which sessions. Like, ultimately, that's my dream, is a system that records its own retrieval patterns in order to optimize itself around its actual use. The way that human beings learn skills. Playing music is a great example. How you start out having to think deliberately about each note and what am I doing with my hands from this moment to that. But with practice, it all gets integrated into muscle memory, and you're able to compose these more complex movements out of the simpler ones that you have drilled into yourself to the point of automaticity. Because once you learn the pattern at a low level, you generally don't need to think about it again. You want to play through the hard parts slowly to debug your movements. They say slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that principle served me very well, actually, especially when I worked at Whole Foods. Just putting produce on shelves and occasionally cutting meat and various things. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And I practiced very smooth movements of, handing off an apple, a lemon, a potato from one hand to another. And, just got the low-level movements down pat to where I could do them very smoothly, very effortlessly, get into a flow state. And then once I had the mechanics of the job down, I could work on my speed. I could do more like trick shots, tossing tossing fruits, across the whole span of my arms, and honestly, I dropped fruits and vegetables on the ground as a result of this, a lot less than even I would have naively expected. Um, but but yeah, part of it was I stayed humble, and I basically only did moves that I was comfortable with. I kept a very thin frontier of like exploratory moves that it felt like it would be okay to try. Um, Whereas, when I'm doing these big vibe coding projects, there's a very thick frontier for exploration where, I can send off agents to, what if we build out this thing and that thing, and what would it look like if we did it this or that way, and you can create all these plans and compare them and distill them to get all the good ideas together. But yeah, it's a very fun time to be working with software, and I definitely feel the pressure to like ride this wave so that I don't drown. Um, and I mean, I don't know if it makes a difference one way or the other, or if every human being is going to be obsolete in a few years, no matter what we do. But yeah, I just think this stuff is super cool, and I've seen the power. I've seen the kind of leverage that facility with these new agent tools brings to people, and yeah, you really have to know what you're doing. There's this world is full of irony and paradox and contradiction, and I have a real taste for these things. Um, but I think there's something ironic and really tragic about the way that the internet in its early days seemed to come with this promise of making people more interconnected in a way that opens them up to new perspectives, and allows everyone the opportunity to access the kinds of experiences that can make you more cosmopolitan and open-minded, and able to drink more deeply from the cup of life. But so much of what has happened with mass adoption of the internet has involved people walling themselves off into echo chambers where they can, instead of having to deal with the rough edges of the people you know in real life and all the little ways that they might be different or get on your nerves, you can silo yourself into a community of people who think just like you and never have to encounter a challenging perspective at all. And so that in some ways people are free to condemn themselves to a much worse parochialism than would even have been possible in days before the internet. And there's another tragic irony that I see here with AI, and it's that there's a sense in which it can democratize intelligence, skill, expertise, and like as a programmer, I really get to experience this because I have good like general programming chops, but there's just so much out there that no one has the time to get familiar with all the tools that are available. But AI has read every piece of software documentation that's available to a web scraper, and probably more than that. But so it has encyclopedic knowledge of all of the native Python libraries and what you can do with them. It knows everything about the nuances of JavaScript and just any language or library or framework that you would care to name. The the AIs can give you a breakdown of how it works and point you to further resources, and you can go and read the docs yourself and say, I was reading about this in the docs and I didn't find a good explanation of it, and ask the AI to drill down on something that the docs don't have great coverage of. And so if you are already operating at a high level, AI can fill in the gaps in your knowledge in a way that feels miraculous. It's the kind of thing where, like, when I graduated college, I would have said probably one of the most important things for a programmer is to have a lot of knowledge off the top of your head of the standard libraries and frameworks and design patterns of your language, the language that you know best. And that's still important. Obviously, you have to know what you're doing, but it's so much less important to have that information in your head, because AI remembers it a lot better than a human being ever could. And so you can free up your memory for more important stuff at a higher level, stuff that's more relevant to your concerns as a human being, and let the more technical knowledge of programming tools be more and more managed by AIs whose information processing style is better suited to that sort of thing. Okay, so Claude is doing a lot. Let's run the full test suite. Okay. Yeah, it's funny. Claude had said at the end of yesterday's session, V1 subagents was going to be the natural follow-on, and I wanted to make sure to get the system prompt refactored into those files before we started doing any work on subagents, because I feel like that's going to be an architectural feature that makes managing subagents a lot easier. But yeah, it's going for observability. Let's go back to cursor and take another look at this plan. Make sure I understand what Claude is thinking here. It's A6. Trivial observability. The candidate set, not just the access. Okay, that's cool. Contemporary systems, Phoenix, Langsmith, Graffiti. I've heard of LangGraph. Not familiar with Langsmith or Graffiti or Phoenix for that matter. Oh, good. Yeah, good that it's introducing me to new AI tools that I can ask AI agents to research and help me rip off in my own project. I don't even need to know what features I'm ripping off. Just say, yeah, do some research on Langsmith and tell me what features or design principles we could apply to the Ngram harness. Yeah, hopefully next it works on subagents. telemetry for subagents would be nice. Parallel subagents. OTel conformance. I don't know what that is. Open telemetry. I just figured it out. Yeah, open telemetry. Is that what? I feel like they're just making up these words. Datadog rings a bell, but I couldn't tell you anything about them. Yeah. Yeah. Eventually I want some telemetry tools on this so we can log the activity to the site. At work we use Pydantic Logfire to track our AI agent actions, at least for the biggest project that I'm working on right now. And yeah, Logfire seems like a very rich interface. I feel like I've just scratched the surface of what that makes available. But yeah, it's been good for tracking tokens and cost of various AI features. Replay mode. Yeah, if we have our activity logs, that makes replay mode pretty easy. At the current model frontier, harness quality dominates. We have a deep trace substrate. We lack a reproducible dataset solver scorer loop. Spect AI. Okay, yeah, that's. But yeah, I just told Claude to do research on agent harness best practices, and this is what it came up with for improving this system. You know, so far I'm not thinking about making any kind of commercial product. You know, this is may or may not be something that I end up actually using to do work, but I feel like it's really coming together. That we've got almost all of the major pieces in place. Subagents is one that yeah, I might want to table and come back to when I've actually used this thing a bit more. But it would be nice to have some sort of basic subagent setup so I can see how that works. You know, if it costs way too much money, what I might want to tweak about it. But yeah, we got this roadmap. And we're kind of blocked on aggregation powered by real data until we collect some more data. You know, I've been using file memory all this time. There's going to be a bunch of tests. Oh, jeez. Well, luckily these aren't version controlled, so they're just going to take up space on my hard drive, but they're not going to GitHub. So again, this loop is where the magic happens. Get some guard messages. And yeah, this is the kind of thing where it would be really nice to be able to track higher level intent across calls to multiple different tool types. Because yesterday we had a problem where it was trying to write too many tokens into a file, and it failed with the write file tool, and it failed with the bash tool, and it failed with the Python tool. But they were all different tool calls, so it never encountered any of these error messages. Output output limit tool block. Yeah, we can call them in parallel batches. Order independent. And that's one of the design principles that recurs at every level. Ordered versus unordered. You know, you're dealing with a list or a set, basically. Run until idle. Now all these parameters. This isn't exactly clean code. Yeah, honestly, this is one of the core functions of the harness, so it would be pretty involved, but yeah, this is a huge function. It needs a refactor. It's like 200 lines to 300. Wow. It starts at line 93 and goes all the way to line 424. So yeah, 330 lines. That's way too big. Just finish that. Okay. Yeah. This I'm not sure we really want to do this as a matter of course. I don't know what the token spend is going to be, or yeah, we probably want some sort of heuristic based on like the number of turns or something, but yeah, just something I thought about that would help with later memory consolidation. That, you know, weeks later we might find through a memory search that something in some previous session is relevant to some problem we're trying to solve. And yeah, I'm just kind of throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Because again, this is a very new design space, and so yeah, we're at the stage where we want a proliferation of features that will be pruned by selection for utility and user friendliness. So maybe run reflection. Yeah, I'll need to do more inspection of this once I have more concrete design questions about how to parameterize the relevant considerations for session reflection. I still don't have very well worked out ideas around that at all. Okay, so we have initial messages, we have a mode. What are our modes? Protocol. What is a Python protocol anyway? Meth. Okay, yeah, there's a bit of Python esoterica. It's not a Python language feature that I've used before, the protocol class. But a mode is a protocol, and a protocol has a method. Okay, and yeah, this is an abstract base class that just defines function signatures. Where are we using this mode? Because Because earlier I was thinking about using the word mode for chat and work and plan. But yeah, the word mode is already taken. You know, I could rename this class, but oh jeez, this okay. We want to search in harness for mode. Okay, mode dot complete. I just don't understand. Okay, right. Because what these modes are is there's a native mode and a grok mode. And so, or is that it? Or is it there's a text mode? And we're seeing comprehension dit rearing its ugly head. And yeah, I'm not even clear why I'm so motivated to lock down comprehension on this particular issue. I think it's going to be very important for subagents, actually. But yeah, I'm thinking that's the next major feature we want to add to this. Where does our mode come from? Because we have native mode. No? So I'm not sure what mode is doing there, but okay, we got our subagents. That's a nice surprise. A6 pairs naturally with the freshly merged A1. Now you can see exactly what semantic versus BM25 ranked, what fusion picked, and which results the agent later read. And very similar to something that I built for work a couple of months ago. B1 on blocks. The biggest single context management when the plan called out. Agents can now offload noisy investigation to a fresh conversation, get a paragraph back. And the conflict with what's open. B2 compaction before durable interrupt build on the same loop infrastructure. The deeper subagent work, parallel dispatch, nested span system prompt refresh also wait till B1's basic shape lands. The user has an opinion on it. Well, let's get some subagents here. But yeah, let's not just merge the PRs. Yeah, one does not simply merge an agent-generated PR. I see green, that's nice. Ah, and we did get our codex review. So yeah, let's spin up. Oh, yeah, you guys didn't see what I was looking at. I was looking at this PR. We have some review comments from my codex code review agent, and we have, I want to do this in cursor, and I want to do this in the agents window, fire off a couple of cloud agents, because I can have cloud agents, you know, working on different PRs on different branches without having to worry that they'll conflict locally. So where are we? We're in diagram harness cloud. And so these are PRs 28 and 29. What was that? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to help them set up their environment. Let's say babysit PR number 28. Pre-install editable dev dependencies for workspace. Nope. I like my backticks. Okay, and then fire this off. Oh wait. I forgot to specify the right branch. It'll figure out the right branch. But yeah, we actually want this on. Right. What branch is it on? Alex subagents, great. So we want Alex subagents, and we want to babysit PR number 29. Okay, now we got 2 PRs getting babysat at once. Install the dev dependencies, we like that. Ha! That's funny, they both... This is a great example of a relevance realization failure, because the relevant task that I'm asking these agents to do is not really about the workspace dev dependencies. That's ancillary to the main task of reviewing the PR. But obviously, the lion's share of the tokens that make up this prompt go to specifying how to install the dev dependencies. And so it gets listed in the sidebar as workspace dev dependencies and not PR review. Yeah, that's funny. But that's why relevance realization is a hard problem. You can't just count what do most of the prompt's tokens describe. You know, like the bit in the mouth of a horse is a small piece, but it steers the whole animal. Yeah, it's really this number. That's the difference that makes the difference. That's the only difference between these two prompts. 2 automated review comments. Cool. This one has... Okay, so this one's still getting situated. In the meantime, I've got a little gooey butter cake. St. Louis treat. Just picked it up at Schnucks. Not a sponsor. Shout out to Schnucks Groceries. I hope my eating sounds aren't too obnoxious. I probably shouldn't do this on stream. But again, good to get it, as it were, out of my system before anyone's actually watching me. You know, I assume the only people who end up watching me ever, send links to my streams to family and friends on occasion, but it's just people wandering in on X or Kick. But, well, I don't think I have a persistent audience yet, and so it's just kind of a free-for-all, fun time, do whatever I want. You know, this is a very divergent phase in relevance realization, dynamical systems terms. This is far to the explore end of the explore-exploit trade-off. And, like, obviously, you know, before I got on this coding on stream kick, I would just play the piano on stream, and so yeah, really shaking things up in terms of the form factor. Subagents reuse the parent's mode. And yeah, again, the name mode is already taken early in the design of this thing. But I couldn't find where that mode class was actually being instantiated, where it was constructing a particular mode for the agent run. And honestly, that is still bugging me. I want to go back here. I would bet that you can specify the mode with a command line argument. You can specify the model, which is only one letter off from mode. But yeah, task is our positional argument. Oh yeah, I never tried the interactive mode yesterday. Parallel tools. Yeah, all of these command line arguments, like we're gonna have graphical controls to manage these things. So, yeah, we don't have a command line argument to specify the mode, and yeah, it's still obscure to me where the mode is actually being created. What if I were to search something like... No good. Action suffix, where's that action suffix come from? Grok, if is grok, else config. Okay. Session config. Where's that coming from? Derived trace paths being called here with this config, which is session configuration passes into build session. Where is build session called? It's called in CLI, that makes sense. Server. Oh, is it the server so it can serve an interactive session? Oh no, it's so it can serve the GUI. Yeah, which I never was able to get working. I wonder. Okay. I want to do something fun. Let's go. Let's make sure I am showing the right cursor window. Actually, we can do this in our editor window. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But okay, let's pull our changes here. And then let's get on the Alex branch and what did I want to do? I lost my train of thought. I was thinking about system prompt improvements. I was thinking about these PRs. We've got quality checks running on our PRs again after they got so PR number 28 is almost ready to merge. I just want to make sure all the quality checks pass. And then number 29, likewise almost ready. But yeah, oh, that's what I was doing. I wanted to use Cursor's embedded browser. Would we be better off doing that in the agents window? I mean, we can do it in both places, really. Okay, so this is still doing some stuff, and this is doing some stuff. So let's find Ngram harness local. On the Alex branch, and we're going to say use the embedded browser to verify that this project's front end, verify that the front end works by sending a real prompt and yeah. And so it's going to have to start up the front end of its own accord. See whether the front end is already running, which it's not. But yeah, these things are pretty good at problem solving. There doesn't appear to be an active dev server. Okay, it seems like it's looking in the right place. Because yeah, it's harness serve. That. So feed add proxy to harness serve on port 8420. And yeah, have I just been not paying attention? Like, yeah, did I not run the API properly when I was previously trying to test the GUI? Yeah, that wasn't something I invested a whole lot of my own attention into. I just kind of tossed it off with Claude Code to see what it could do. And yeah, as far as the design of it, it's not bad. It's pretty minimal, but yeah, it's gonna run on a proper site one day. I'm building this up, and I'm building up the site that's gonna host it, and yeah, my agent's gonna have its own email address at thealexfreeman.com, and I'll be able to send it emails to give it different jobs. No, not a spectacularly creative test prompt from GPT-5 here. And so, see, I think that was my problem, is I was only ever running the front end, and I just never ran the back end. Which, you know, I would never make that mistake at work. It was like, I know my workflow at work very well, but yeah, you know, I'm just starting to put together a workflow. You may want to end setup agent prompt. You want another agent to do your homework for you? Like, it's like, of course you had to install the full editable dev environment. That was what I told you to do. You recorded that as the purpose of this whole conversation. But yeah, that's kind of quirky. I don't know what to make of that, but let's watch me merge some PRs. So we got, okay, so this one's green, the other one's still running. Alright, we got sub-agents. And then I think a natural pattern for the n-gram harness is going to be we can have one sub-agent review internal memory and then another sub-agent do web search. Yeah. Okay. So let's come up here and let's have some more fun with my harness. Oh, maybe I could be one of those mukbang streamers. I don't know. Tell me in the chat if anyone's listening. Are my chewing sounds like a pleasant ASMR type of thing, or is it just torture? And probably different for different people. I hope it's absolute torture. But, well, let's fire up the harness. First things first. Get our changes actually on the local branch. Okay, so now we'll say, what do we want? What do we want? Use sub-agents to, yeah, I'm going to start out very explicit. Use one sub-agent to search your knowledge base, and another to search web, then write some detailed knowledge files. Cognitive science. That's some detailed cognitive science. So detailed cognitive science. I'm a stickler for proper hyphen hygiene. Detailed cognitive science knowledge files on affordances, Umwelt, and related concepts. And memory should be n-gram by default, so let's see what happens. Yeah, first act of the day. Okay, we're firing off sub-agents. Let's go. Okay, let's watch the traces. No, they're not going to be in traces, they're going to be in activity. Because we're using the system as intended. Oh yeah. And so, spawn sub-agent. Ooh, search local memory, knowledge base, affordances, umwelt, ecological psychology. Jakob von Uichel. Yeah, that's funny. Umlaut, ooh. Gibson, inactivism, phenomenology. Yeah. Topics to research: affordances, J.J. Gibson; ecological psychology, direct perception; affordance ontology. Affordance ontology. I'm a big believer. I would say that was a big factor in curing me of my materialistic atheism. And I will say the influence of LSD played no small part in opening my receptivity to new paradigms in ontology, but yeah, basically, I understand a thing as a cluster of affordances. I tend to view ontology as grounded in the phenomenology of affordances, because phenomenology is our starting point for all philosophy, for all knowledge. That's just the way it is. That's what it means to be a subject with a perspective on the world. Is you have a phenomenology that is your entry point into life, into being, into existence. And yeah, and what is your phenomenal experience made of? It's made of affordances. What are the atoms of perception, as it were? They are affordances. You know, man, I got such a good education at Berkeley. One of the professors I had there for philosophy of mind, Alvin Noe. Um, we bought one of his books called Out of Our Heads, I think, for his philosophy of mind class. But the book he wrote before that, his debut, was called Action in Perception, where Alvin Noe is very much an inactivist in terms of his view of cognition, that he thinks of perception as properly situated in a feedback loop of action and response from environment. All right, biosemiotics, that's the good stuff. Okay. Where is this? Where are all these files? They're in workspace. Yeah. Notes. Nope. Yeah. I don't know what exactly this. Okay, we just don't have any archived threads yet. Mimetics knowledge. It's more or less finished. But yeah. J.J. Gibson, affordances. Very important. Affordance is the central concept of James J. Gibson's ecological psychology, the view that organisms perceive the world not as a collection of physical properties, but as a structured field of action possibilities. You take enough LSD, this becomes obvious. An affordance is a relational property. It is what the environment offers a particular organism, given that organism's body, capacities, and needs. The concept has been enormously influential, migrating from ecological psychology into phenomenology and activism, human-computer interaction design, robotics, and biosemiotics, though often with significant reinterpretation along the way. And I'm another link in that chain with this whole project. The dominant view of perception was indirect. The sense organs deliver raw data. Yeah. Yeah, right. And so like medieval theories of vision had this idea of rays that emanate from the eye, yeah, toward the camera. But no, it's funny because I'm seeing the camera, and I don't know, it just imagining a ray coming out of my eye, and then I look at my OBS and it looks like my hand is light bouncing off my face into the camera. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but it's not just that light bounces off of things in the world and comes into our eyes and makes a little picture like a pinhole camera. It's that, you know, they've known this for a long time in computer vision. It's hard to discriminate objects and surfaces and tell what's what just from a 2D projected image. And so we do a lot of cognitive work. It's basically the whole back half of your brain is dedicated to visual processing. And there's two systems, there's two streams. There's object recognition and spatial orientation. It's very complicated. We use a lot of neural hardware to see. And so, you know, there aren't anything like a laser beam coming out of your eye, but there is a real aspect of yourself that you bring to bear on the world, in order to be the kind of thing that can perceive anything at all. You know, naively, one might think that our visual system works like a camera, but nowadays, in the days of machine learning systems, it's obvious our visual system works a lot more like a computer vision system, which is so complicated we literally don't understand it. We train inscrutable neural nets to do the job. But yeah, what is the core concept? The affordances of the environment are what it offers the animal, what it provides or furnishes, either for good or ill. Right. Think also of Jordan Peterson. He talks about, he's big on narrative as the structural organizing principle of cognition. And Peterson has talked, I don't think he uses the word affordance, but he has talked about how you don't see objects, you see tools and obstacles, right? I think that's the opening of his book, Maps of Meaning, where he talks about the world is not a space full of objects. It can be conceptualized that way, you know, in the abstractions of physics or whatever, but the world as we experience it is a forum for action. And so I feel like he must discuss Gibson and affordances in ecological psychology, because he's working along such similar lines in Maps of Meaning. But I can't recall ever hearing Peterson talk specifically about this whole school of thought in like an interview or something. You know, he doesn't mention J.J. Gibson 10% as often as he mentions Jeffrey Gray or Jaak Panksepp. You know, that's much more where his head is at, than very sort of nuts and bolts neuroscience type of thing. Social and linguistic affordances. And when you're thinking about LLMs, really all they have is linguistic affordances. Conventional affordances that depend on cultural Okay, and so here's where I was trying to think about when the agent got stuck in the loop where it kept trying write the file using write file, write the file using bash, write the file using Python, and it failed every time. Um, these are examples of different, as it were, physical affordances, trying to instantiate the same affordance at the symbolic level. Oh, beautiful. Okay, and so are we also going to get, once it finishes streaming its response, we should get the response saved in its own file. And we have the whole file content in the trace. How delightful. Oh my goodness, and this took 31 turns? Wow. 33 turns altogether. Not bad. Okay, we got this, and we have... This is one thing I put in. It's like, I want to store the reply as its own markdown file. Yeah, okay. This has final response. This stores the whole text, but that's not human readable. I much prefer something like this. What was written and where? 6 detailed cognitive science knowledge files were written and promoted to memory/knowledge/cognitive science. Affordances. Good. Umwelt. Vehicle biosemiotics. Anti-mechanist biology and Kantian epistemology. I'm a big fan of Kantian epistemology. Funktionskreis, the functional circle. Merkwelt, Werkwelt. Heidegger. Again, my knowledge of Heidegger is not what it could be. I know he is very important, but I mean, honestly, what is it with Germans and philosophy? Like, that's... Yeah, I obviously, I'm American, I speak English. I'm much more Anglo-American in my philosophical sensibilities. But yeah, I think neologisms in English are fun, but when Heidegger does it in German, it's atrocious. It's unreadable. But yeah, biosemiotics. I haven't really investigated biosemiotics at all. If I'd heard the word before, I dismissed it as sounds like some woo-woo nonsense. Peircean sign theory. Charles Sanders Peirce. Probably the second greatest American philosopher after William James. But frankly, means I don't have a whole lot of competition, and so I can be ambitious if I want to be the greatest American philosopher. Not that William James is any kind of lightweight, but yeah, it's not like we're Germany. Any German that wants to do philosophy, they're in the shadow of Kant and Nietzsche and Hegel, and not to mention Heidegger and Wittgenstein and Rudolf Carnap. Just so many titanically influential figures. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah. It gets back to what I was reflecting on last night about relationships and community, and how, in my life of the mind, I situate myself in an abstract sort of community that's distributed across space and time, and And in some ways it's sad, and in some ways it's cool that I find I can have more fellowship with guys like Nietzsche and Kierkegaard than with people I know in the flesh. And I mean, you just have to be grateful that they put so much of themselves out into the world for future generations to encounter. Um, and in some ways, I'm trying to pay it forward. I could just be holed up in my office thinking about this alone. You know, my neighbors would hear me talking to myself like a madman, and this fucking thing would still be sending all my data to the NSA data center in Utah, but not for human ears. Species-specific reality, consciousness. What is it like to be a... The Nagel connection was very good. That was a nice find. Chalmers' hard problem. Evidence for rich animal experience. The diversity of sensory modalities is world constituting. An activism on species-specific experience. Thompson, Evan Thompson, very relevant. Morgan's canon critique, I don't know what that is. Functionalism and qualia theory. And then we have a synthesis document. Nice. Organism-environment coupling and rejection of Cartesian internalism. Which, I watched an interview a few weeks ago now with David Bentley Hart being interviewed by Alex O'Connor, and David Bentley Hart made this great critique of Daniel Dennett that, like, in his book Consciousness Explained, Dennett is at pains to dispel this illusion that he calls the Cartesian theater, that all of our sense perceptions get channeled into a central location where they're received by a kind of unitary witness, that, as it were, embodies the unity of our consciousness as we experience it. And Dennett basically believes the unity of consciousness is an illusion, and that we just basically have multiple drafts of potential conscious content active and like ready to go at any time. And I love the metaphor that he uses. He says consciousness is like fame in the brain, where and like the metaphor does a few things, because it refactors our perception from, like, it has to be a unitary kernel of a thing. Like, experienced meditators will talk about units of experience chained like beads on a string, and Dennett would think that's nonsense. That's a perspectival illusion. But fame in the brain, the idea that it's something that can have degrees, and it can be in some sense localized. Like there's actually a lot of richness to our idea of fame, that makes it a useful and a flexible metaphorical frame for thinking about how is the brain doing relevance realization. But so David Bentley Hart was talking about how in Dennett's model he like really strongly rejects this idea of an inner observer, that Hebrews would call it neshama, that Dennett would say that there's no such thing. There's just voices in your head and no one to listen to them, I guess. But then, like, in his later work, like his last, I think it was his last book published during his lifetime, before his posthumously published autobiography, but which which I do have on my shelf here, From Bacteria to Bach and Back, this book is a masterpiece. I read it back in 2018, and you can see how many book darts I put in this thing. This was really a wonderful book. It's psychedelic, but like, okay, what are we doing? Okay. But because Dennett is big on this idea of the manifest image. Little uncharitable to Dennett to say he thought of consciousness as an illusion, but Dennett's not going to care, he's dead. But so there's a chapter in this book called Consciousness as an Evolved User Illusion. Right. Consciousness is an evolved user. You take my word that that's what the chapter is called. But like, it comes all the way back around to the idea of the Cartesian theater, because Dennett talks about our consciousness as being like a user interface that hides the true complexity of the world. But in establishing this metaphorical frame, he puts us right back in the Cartesian theater, where you have a single conscious subject that is being confronted with this user illusion, right? Right? There has to be a user for there to be a user illusion. Otherwise, you have voices in your head that no one's listening to. Okay, I think something went wrong with the cross-session continuity mechanics here, as it didn't exactly give a logical follow-up. And yeah, that's something I haven't put a whole lot of work. How does this relate to the manifest image? But yeah, so what was its reply here? This you're pointing out isn't in the session notes. The question of whether AI systems like Ngram have any... Oh, swing and a miss. Okay, so yeah, some sort of session continuity failure. It's funny because yesterday, when I accidentally had the Ngram memory on by default, it thought I was referring to the literature summary that I had it right in a previous session. But yeah, in this case, it didn't pick up what it was supposed to. And yeah, let's kick this over to GPT 5.5. Why did cross session? Yeah, why did session continuity fail here? But yeah, so what is this? The manifest image and Dennett's illusion. Yeah, but no, I really wanted this to be contextualized by all of the previous work on affordances and ecological psychology. Both the manifest image and the scientific image are real descriptions of the world, but they can't simply be added together. Right, the manifest image is the world we live in. Is the framework within which norms and reasons live. Not to mention persons. then it accepts the scientific image as bedrock and then offers a deflationary reconstruction of the manifest image. Everything that seems ontologically problematic, qualia of the unified self, what it's like is an artifact of cognitive work. Huh. Yeah, and Nagel is the point of connection here. That, yeah, relevant to the affordance stuff and also relevant to this, even though it doesn't have the affordance work in its context here. Recent sessions is summary based, not transcript based. Okay, and so I'm trusting the agent. But you know, it should have gotten this summary, huh? Okay, but yeah. They asked memory for recent sessions, but the answer still lacked enough conversational context. Session continuity failed at the deictic reference layer, not at persistence. Man. Deixis is the noun form of deictic, the adjective here. It's Greek, but the use of like this and that and here and there, all this relative language. Like deixis is the ultimate relevance realization challenge. It's sort of the highest level of pragmatics, like where the meaning of the word is totally loaded into the pragmatic layer rather than emerging from anything about the word itself. You know, this or that are totally generic specifiers. It's entirely inferred from context. So the meaning is you know, it's all at the pragmatic level. And so yeah, deixis is the pinnacle of pragmatic meaning as one of the hardest challenges of linguistic relevance realization. Yeah, session continuity failed at the deictic reference layer, which is actually not too surprising because it's hard. Oh my goodness. How does this relate? The harness did not carry over the raw previous conversational context. Yeah. And so, and like here is where I do want to do some more serious first principles design thinking about context management, because this problem is deeply related to context compaction. That like how do we preserve the relevant information and discard what is irrelevant so that we don't clutter up the context with a bunch of irrelevant procedural information about how it made all of these tool calls to accomplish this thing. You know, we can just summarize the story of it, you know, to give a compressed session summary to the next session. Okay. It did not explicitly encode the current referent of this is the affordance umlaut and action synthesis from the immediate. But it's not like a JavaScript function where you have a this keyword that has an explicit reference. You know, that's the point of deictic language. You don't have to. Yeah. But like this is This is a very meaning-laden technical problem that I'm going to have to do some deep thinking about in order to lay the foundation for a good context compaction system. But yeah, also I've got to read up on affordances and ecological psychology. Like, I don't know. I think it's so cool that in a matter of minutes, I can get these nice write-ups. And, like, I could go to Wikipedia or Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I could read about all this stuff, but I mean, to have the tools to review the knowledge base beforehand so that the files it writes up are framed explicitly in terms of their relevance to the existing knowledge in the system. That's something you can't get anywhere else. That's something that previously I would have to do in my head and like take notes on the relevance of different topics if I was doing research online. But now so much of that information management work can be offloaded to the AI, and I just need to read through it to make sure that it's not making egregious errors. Here's a fun one. The file on Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's pretty good. Zarathustra is a deep book, and there's plenty more that it could have picked up. This file could have been 10 times as long, but where is it? It is a silly, nitpicky thing. So the choice of a prophet rather than a philosopher is the first argument of the book. Nietzsche had already laid out his critique of morality, religion, and metaphysics in discursive works, The Gay Science, Beyond Good and Evil, on the Genealogy of Morality. And that is a subtle error, because at the time Nietzsche wrote Zarathustra, he had only written The Gay Science. Beyond Good and Evil and Genealogy of Morals came after. And I know for sure that Zarathustra came right after The Gay Science, because the last chapter of The Gay Science is first chapter of Zarathustra. But in some sense, the relative dates of the publication are irrelevant to the point that this is a different kind of work than Nietzsche's other philosophy. It is more like a book of fiction or a religious text. That was an explicit stylistic choice by Nietzsche. But so you can't just take the AI's word for it. You have to actually know what you're doing to catch its mistakes. Someone who isn't as familiar with Nietzsche wouldn't necessarily have caught this little anachronism. Not that it would have made much of a difference to anything for any practical purpose, but a line like that in a college essay, you're going to lose points. Don't make AI do your homework for you, kids. But yeah, I really do want to read through these files. There's a lot of good stuff here. Shared ontological picture, organism, environment. Dyads are the basic unit of biological analysis, not organisms alone or environments alone. Each framework has a what it rejects and what it proposes. It's not X, it's Y. Nice concept map. This is really good. Niche construction. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know half these names. And so yeah, I mean, I've got further research and reading to do, but yeah, the way it grounds it in predictive processing, and there's a bunch of knowledge files on predictive processing here, and the relevance of predictive processing to relevance realization, the whole top-down, bottom-up, convergent versus divergent. It's all the same thing. We're all looking at the same thing here. Affordance, meaning carrier, effectivity, effect organ, Werkwelt, it's work world. Yeah, there's two kinds of philosophy that makes sense as opposed to being just a bunch of gobbledygook like the French do. But there's English philosophy and German philosophy, and you can kind of see the two approaches here. Yeah, this German with the unpronounceable name versus the fine English names like Gibson and Friston. And Carl Friston really does sound very smart with that accent of his. The relevance problem reconsidered. This is what I love to see. It contextualizes it in terms of relevance to the existing knowledge base. How does an organism determine what is relevant in the first place? Each framework takes some level of relevance as given. Gibson affordances are directly perceived. And that was all of my work yesterday with affordances in the system prompt, making something available directly to the, as it were, perception of the AI. That these are first-class artifacts in the system prompt, and they are top-level actions you can take. You can emit a tool line, you can emit a memory line, you can emit a work line. Which modifications constitute niche construction versus random environmental perturbation? I mean, obviously that can only be determined in retrospect. It's the ones that end up constructing a niche rather than being a transient fluctuation in the layout of the environment. But that's just my opinion. I don't think anyone's learning anything from these streams about how to build an agent harness. Maybe I'm giving good examples of how to work with AI agents and use them to get reliable, productive work. But more than anything, I hope that these streams are just a clinic in clear thinking for you, dear viewer, and that even if you're not consciously attending so much to everything I'm saying, I'm still laying down my own thought patterns as expressed in language into your unconscious, insofar as you're taking in any of my words at all. But yeah, so you're welcome. But yeah, I'm at a point in the construction of the harness where, sub-agents work well. I definitely want to tune the sub-agents system, but yeah, actually that is something that I wanted to look into, was activity. Not there. The one with the sub-agents. So, okay, this can go away, and that can go away. Wow, okay. Okay, so we wrote all those files. Okay. Spawn a subagent. And then, how are we tracking the work that's being done by the subagents? Is there... Oh my goodness, did the run with the subagents actually failed? I saw it tried to dispatch them, and then I was stuffing my face with gooey butter cake. Streaming is required. So... Yeah, I'm also noticing a bug in the path resolver because, and yeah, I think this is something that I just didn't explicitly specify when I was telling agents to code this thing up, but it seems like common sense to me that paths that are valid relative to the project root, the ngram root, the ngram core, or the ngram memory folders should all validly resolve. And so, like, I think it should be legit, and I think it should be legit to call list files with knowledge / philosophy / phenomenology. And wait, no, except this, yeah, this is not a memory tool. This is just the harnesses on list files tool. But still, the agent should be smart enough to know where things are relative to its working directory. But yeah, no, I actually need to make the path resolver more robust so that it doesn't waste time and tokens on errors like these that are so easily avoidable. Yeah, and really, I mean, yeah, instead of listing all the files in the directory, you should just be able to read a summary file that's in that directory. Although it's probably fewer tokens actually to just list the files with. Yeah. But yeah, I've definitely got some low-level bug fixing to do. Yeah. Yeah, I think actually that's the strategy that I'm going to use for the path resolver. Is if it's not a valid path just out of the box, which I assume it would be relative to the project's root directory, then we just walk down. Yeah. Right. What if we try to read a file that's in a project? I will need to think a lot more about how I'm going to make the path resolver more sophisticated so that we can do things like this without... Because the fully specified path would be ngram / core / memory / knowledge / philosophy / phenomenology. But that's a mouthful. Or a context window full if you're an LLM. But yeah, let's go ahead and... What is this? This is 001. What happened with the attempt? Yeah, I don't want the whole file because this file is huge. I've got a million token context window. It's not going to get lost, but... What happened with the subagents here? Yeah, it's saying streaming is required, and so probably that's just an output feature that we can add without too much trouble. I bet I can have GPT 5.5 make a detailed plan to implement this feature. Okay, that's simple enough. How can we enable this doesn't happen again? Yeah, and then this is going through the Anthropic SDK. And it'll probably be different in Grok mode because that's using the OpenAI SDK. And so everything that I've been doing probably gonna break if I try it with Grok, but we'll see. Make it so. I realize I need to edit and update something. Maybe I should consider using to-do's. That's a good one. Consider using to-dos. I want to make sure I have enough commentary. I think I need to inspect the top config too. Yeah. So yeah, just situating itself. Gotta get familiar with how these things think if you want to get good work out of them. Passes stream sync to child loop. Okay. But yeah, I think that's a good pattern for research adding to the knowledge base. Just spawn 2 sub-agents in parallel. One reviews the existing knowledge base, one does a bunch of web search. Yeah. And there's an argument that these shouldn't be parallel, they should be sequential, because you want to review the knowledge base so that you know what you need to search for versus what you don't need to search for because it's already pretty well covered. But that's the kind of thing that I can parameterize and say, yeah, run these sub-agents in parallel versus run them in sequence. Or, right, obviously I can just have the main agent run in a sequence. No, it still makes sense to delegate to a sub-agent because yes, because I can tell my sub-agent review the existing knowledge base and suggest topics for further web search related to the topic of affordances, say. Okay. Knowledge files don't need a separate commit. Okay. Use one sub-agent to search your knowledge base, another to search the web, then write. Okay, what else do we want knowledge files on? Okay. Write some detailed. I would say this belongs more in the realm of philosophy. Knowledge files on. Ian McGilchrist and hemispheric specialization. We'll put this in cognitive science because we want to ground it. What am I doing? Ian McGilchrist and hemispheric specialization. Yep. Okay. Let's see what happens. cognitive science, neuroscience, McGilchrist, hemispheric specialization, budget medium, good context loaded, strong background in cognitive linguistics and philosophy of mind, that's right. Okay, we're firing 2 subagents. Oh, Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty, 2 great tastes that taste great together. Okay, so we're seeing subagents run now. The Vervaeke-Friston connections, yes! It's coming together. Right, because what's already in the knowledge base informs what gets written in further research sessions because the AI has a sense of what's relevant based on what's already there. Embedded annotation. Is it meant to be enaction? But yeah, master and emissary. Which, yeah, I was actually just looking at it. I have it on my desk here, which is why I thought to write that particular knowledge file. Yeah, Ian McGilchrist, he's another like serious scientist with a lot of brilliant ideas who puts out so much high quality stuff on YouTube. Readiness to hand, Zuhandenheit. Yeah, right. Right, Zuhandenheit and Vorhandenheit. Oh, nice. We're getting a response. Cool, cool. Runs channel McGilchrist. Lives on the Isle of Skye. I always thought it would be fun if there was a boat race or a swimming race or something from the Isle of Wight to the Isle of Man. It's something I thought of. I was thinking about the Isle of Skye. That's neither here nor there. McGilchrist's entire historical thesis in The Master and his Emissylchrist. Something got garbled there. Analytical categorizing mode destroying the embodiment. Western civilization's trajectory is a story of left hemisphere increasing. Okay. Oh yeah, so are we going to get a reply? Right, that one didn't run any subagents, but yeah, so here what happened was we tried to call somewhere, tool call spawn subagent, which, yeah, come to think of it, subagents might be our 4th affordance type in the system prompt. Yeah, I will want to do some brainstorming with Claude about how to set that up well, but I'm thinking I mean, not that it's so inconvenient to use the regular tool call syntax, but yeah, in some sense I'm thinking of subagents as kind of a first-class harness operation, although, I don't know, do we want to be spinning up subagents all the time? That's a design question that's going to depend a lot on how I'm actually using this thing. but 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 I do like the idea of a research skill of some kind that spins up two subagents, and we can have a parameter to say whether you want to run these in parallel or in sequence, and there would be different considerations for the two. Um, the big advantage to running them in sequence is you can review your knowledge base beforehand, so you know what not to search, what you don't need more information on when you come to the web search part. Whereas if you run them in parallel, the web search might find a bunch of stuff that you already have in your knowledge base, and you just wasted that many tokens on redundant information. But yeah, I think probably we want to use subagents pretty sparingly at this point, but already I'm seeing a good pattern to use them this way in research, and yeah, see if there's much of a difference in terms of cost or in terms of knowledge quality, running subagents in parallel versus in sequence. Okay, but so here we have, okay, and so here I want, yeah, I want some way to track what the subagents are doing as well. We spawn subagent, we give it a task, and then we get the result, and right, in the, as it were, phenomenology of the main agent, that makes sense. You spawn the subagent, you delegate it, and it just gets back to you with a report. But if, like, this is part of the infrastructure of the Ngram harness, we want to track what the subagents are doing too, not just see this is what it looks like to the main agent. I want the story of the subagents as well. But, so did it get back to us? It wrote a file. Okay, so yeah, it's still trying to save the file or whatever. In cognitive science, hemispheric specialization, knowledge. Yeah, Ian McGilchrist. His work synthesizes an unusually wide range of disciplines. My kind of guy. Clinical neurology, phenomenological philosophy, cultural history, and metaphysics. He occupies a rare intellectual niche, neither a pure scientist nor a pure humanist, but someone whose credentials in both domains allow him to work the seam between them. I don't know about credentials, but that is a niche that appeals to me as well. The synthesis of scientific and humanistic thinking. He read English. Oh, we all read English. But obviously in Britain that's how they say what we would say as he majored in English, or he studied English. Definitely can't fall into the trap of assuming my viewers and listeners are on a par with me in terms of world knowledge and insightfulness, and so it never hurts to spell things out. No offense, nobody's listening anyway. Attack the academic discipline of literary criticism as a pathological form of over-systematization. Structuralism and post-structuralist theory. Yeah, academia should have listened to Camille Paglia when she said that Erich Neumann's Origins and History of Consciousness would have been a better foundation for literary theory as a replacement for the religious frame, instead of all this post-structuralist nonsense we ended up with. But you know, if academia were in a healthier state, I would be cloistered away in some university, stuck in a library till 3 a.m. instead of having all of this delicious fun with AI agents. So, no. Frankly, my life has been kind of a bumpy road relative to the degree of promise that I showed as a child. But I also feel like I've ended up in a life situation that works very well for me. And yeah, all things considered, right now in this moment, I'm very happy to be doing what I'm doing in terms of learning how to work with AI agents and yeah, spending a lot of time doing deep first principles thinking about affordances. Yeah, rereading Dennett and Terence Deacon. It's just, these AIs have come on the scene, and it's tempting to feel like they can do all of our thinking for us, but we have so much homework to do if we want to have any hope of living good lives in the future that's coming. I don't know. I want to find reasons to be optimistic, but I will say that is not the natural grain of my character. And we have seen things go wrong already with AI in various domains, and yeah, I have a certain sensitivity to potential ways that these technologies could go wrong as they develop further. Frankly, all this work is what I'm doing instead of setting up OpenClaw on my old laptop because I don't trust it. I want to own the session and the memory management and do it my way. And yeah, we'll see if I end up building something that I can use, let alone anyone else. I mean, right, I'm using it already to do research on hemispheric specialization, so the brain has two halves, right? And relevance realization has two parts. There's a convergent part and a divergent part, and it's very clear to me that the left hemisphere is primarily concerned with convergence, and the right hemisphere is primarily concerned with divergence. And the left hemisphere has a convergent perspective on the world, the right hemisphere has a divergent perspective on the world. And I love McGilchrist's framing of the rationale for this split, because he says, everything with a brain confronts two basic problems of life. That you have to eat, and at the same time, not be eaten. And so you have one half of your being that is specialized for focused, detail-oriented work in domains that you know well. Hand to mouth, targeted trajectory in a well-mapped space in a familiar domain. While the other half of your being is more concerned with threat detection, and so it pays attention in a way that's totally different. It's more diffuse, it's more parallelized, and it's more able to, send a hard interrupt to whatever the left brain is doing to say, break the existing frame, and say, Jesus Christ, it's a lion, get in the car. That is an ancient meme. I mean, that is literally like a 20-year-old meme at this point. Yeah, we're doing some meme archaeology while my Agent Harness writes up files about hemispheric specialization. We're living in the future. Jesus Christ, it's a lion, get in the car. So, 20 years was an exaggeration, but not by much. The Know Your Meme page is 16 years old, which that's a hard lower bound on how old is the meme itself. An expression often used to caption image macros featuring photos of lions or other felines. This emoticon is meant to represent the face of a lion. Toothpaste for dinner. Basic electronic symbols. Huh. I actually did not know that. Yeah, I'd seen the meme all over the place. This is from the same generation of memes as ICANN has cheeseburger and like Rage Guy comics. This is ancient history. But this is what the right brain does. It detects threats and tells you you have to take some drastic action now to respond to this thing that just came up, instead of things proceeding according to plan in a well-understood domain like the left hemisphere is for. And so that's another little glimpse into the semiotic substructures of my particular psyche. And we're back just in time. We're updating our cognitive science summary. Are we writing a session reflection? The lines of the memory section are read. Let me append the new section. Good. Very good. So yeah, his two major books, The Master and His Emissary, which again, highly recommend. It's kind of a tome, but it's a booklet compared to the work that follows it up, The Matter with Things. Yeah, Parable attributed to Nietzsche. The core thesis, non-folk psychology version. Explicitly and emphatically distances himself from the 1970s pop science version of left brain, right brain theory, which, of course, the 1970s pop science version was a popularization of some of the conclusions that were being reached in the early work on hemispheric specialization that, now are much more sophisticated understanding after 50 more years of research. We know the left brain logical, verbal, right brain creative, emotional is a total caricature. That's not what they're doing. They're both deeply involved in all kinds of processes. It's just they take different perspectives. Left brain has a convergent perspective. Right brain has a divergent perspective. Difference lay not in what they do, but in how they do it. Alright, narrow, focused, instrumental, to eat. Versus the right hemisphere is broad, open, vigilant, to not be yourself eaten. Focal, part first, right? Take a piece of food and put it in your mouth. Versus right hemisphere is holistic, context first. Scan the environment as a whole for threats that you need to. You need to pay attention in a parallelized way, whereas the attention structure of the left hemisphere is more sequential. And like that's a big part of like why the left hemisphere is so useful for processing text in a linear sequence, and then the right hemisphere can, scan an image in parallel such that the salient features of it jump out. Yeah, which, come to think of it, does McGilchrist cite McLuhan anywhere in this book? No. No. Yeah. So yeah, Vladimir Mayakovsky, Colin McGinn, all the way to Chris McManus, David McNeil, Meister Eckhart. Yeah, no McLuhan. But yeah, that guess that's more homework for me, is synthesizing McLuhan's whole thesis about the alphabet and print with this hemispheric specialization stuff from McGilchrist. Also there's this guy Leonard Schlein, Schlain, which he's a surgeon. Frankly, he's not as serious a thinker as McGilchrist, but he's written some very interesting books. One that's the most relevant is called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, and very, very similar to McLuhan in terms of his analysis of how text reshapes the mind, and different societies can have different ways of thinking based on whether they're more of an oral or a visual culture. And I would say Schlein is more of a partisan of the oral culture, tending to see textual culture as like patriarchal and oppressive, whereas McLuhan's perspective was more, text is the foundation of our civilization, even as he recognized its historical aberrant quality, like the anomalosity, right? It's the fact that it's an anomaly in history that we would have such a text-heavy culture at all, that the natural state of humans is much more oral, auditory language processing. Remember, the language is a human birthright. Literacy is a technology that some societies develop and other societies don't, and the societies that do develop it in very different ways. It is not a natural human capacity the way that speaking a language is. And I mean, we're seeing all around us the fruits of this kind of silly idea that everyone should learn to read. Like, that's a fine idea when your society is 90% white, but I shouldn't talk about that. But I will say, as an aside here, it is kind of funny how people talk about a decline in American students' test scores. And they'll talk about it in terms of, what is the educational system doing wrong? Are the schools worse than they were in previous generations? But I think part of the problem is demographics, and that a lot of the students who are in school today are not descended from the students who were getting those better test scores in past generations. And so there's kind of a disconnect, expecting the present to be like the past, because actually things are different now than they used to be. But